Hello and welcome to the Quackcast. This is Quackcast number 725. I'm Ocean. With me is Baines and Gunwallace.
Hello.
Oh, wow. That's so good. And we're going to be talking about comics that you loved when you were a kid. Back again after the theme song. Ha ha ha, that was so cool. Okay, so now, we're talking about comics that we loved when we were a kid, but first we have to introduce the featured comic. Featured comic this week was Rebellion, the Monster Inside of Us. So I'm going to tell you about that now. Hello, I'm Ocean, and my feature for the week was Rebellion, the Monster Inside Us. Rush has become a monster, savage, driven by animal instinct for survival, by fear and dominance. His power is immeasurable, unaccountable, unstoppable. Born a poor slave, the lowest of the low, he faced terrible abuse and trauma beyond imagining. Escaping to the wilderness, left alone with the horrors and monsters there, he had to become a monster in order to survive. Now he's finally returning to enact a terrible vengeance. The style is horror, drama, action, fight comic. The art style is manga influenced, black and white, with lots of effects, splat marks, and heavy line work that really enhance the action and tone of the story. There's a warning on this because there's some, it's a very violent comic and there's some oblique references to sexual violence, which is always a bit of a warning. Yeah. But it's oblique, so it's not direct and obvious. Anyway, I hope you enjoy this exciting violent fight comic, Rebellion, the Monster Inside Us. And this is by Murry Ball, and it's rated M for mature. And that was Rebellion, Monster Inside of Us. Okay, and next up we have the featured music that our resident composer has given us this week. And it was the theme to Snake in the Office. So this was a comic I featured last year sometime, probably early last year, I don't know. And I really loved it. Very, very sexy comic about, I suppose that there's this thing in manga, a fad of monster girls that just sort of happened in the last 5 years or so, maybe 10 years. And suddenly they had just weird monsters in weird situations, so just in offices or going to school or whatever, like really strange, like Spider Women and Snake Girls and stuff like this. And this comic is basically going along with that trend, which is pretty cool. And it's a really good comic, and it's very sexy too, but not adult. It's family friendly. Well, not family friendly, but friendly enough that it's not, explicit.
Family friendly, assuming one of the family is a teenage boy.
Yes. Exactly.
Yeah. Or a teenage girl that likes snake women.
Either or. Don't discriminate in this one. And so, yes, this music is chaotic, sexy, rocking, snake charming to layers of groovy electric guitar and piano tiptoeing around with a charming little tune tying it all together like a fine Persian rug. A sinuous synth clarinet impersonates a snake charming flute while giving us a lovely 1920s feel, as only clarinets can. So, take it away, Gunwallace, with A Snake in the Office.
Very nice.
offers. Sneak in the offers. Gunwallace, thank you so much for that. Okay, so we are now going to talk about the comics we loved as kids. The ones we grew up with, the ones that formed our kind of sense of the world and maybe gave us a bit of education about comics. I think that's what happens, doesn't it? You read these comics and these things kind of direct you into the ways that you should be drawing comics. I'm pretty sure, if I looked at the old comics that I used to read and stuff, I'd be going, oh my god, these things were formative. I wouldn't be doing stuff the way I did it today if it wasn't for what I'd read as a kid. To some degree.
If I had known that, I would have read far less Family Circus.
Oh god, the best comics ever created.
Embedding itself.
Jesus, those things are terrible, aren't they?
Yeah, even as a kid, they were bad, but they were books that we had around, so you make do with what you have.
There is some about Kathy was a crap one, although I didn't read that when I was a little kid. I read that when I was a teen, but not very good comic.
Never could relate to Kathy. I guess same thing. Being a kid, teen.
She's always got a face that kind of thing.
That worked well on the audio cast.
On audio.
Ozone did a stupid face. But yeah, Kathy, I think she goes like, blah. That's her thing all the time, isn't it? Something goes wrong and she goes, blah. She can't cope with it.
Maybe. She always had a stressed out face, but definitely.
Yeah, it's just shit.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, you sent round what the topic was for this Quackcast after I had gone to bed. So yeah. I've prepared to talk about crop rotation in the early modern period instead. So, do you favour the 3-field system or the 4-field system?
Oh, definitely. You should always leave your crops to go fallow in order to, concentrate the nitrogen again. That's very important.
Oh, yeah.
How are you going to get a bumper crop again in the next couple of years? It's simple stuff. Come on, guys.
Well, now we've sorted that
out. Well, yeah, so comics. Let's see. We already did this in our video cast, of course. Now we're rehashing it as we do, but we'll expand upon it, I think. So, my earliest memories of comics, I can't even remember what my earliest memories of comics was. I think I did try and read some X-Men when I was a really little kid, and I just could not frickin' stand it. And some Spider-Man too. It just wasn't me. There's whatever, Marvel comics. It just was not my thing. It was too dramatic and it's too serious. So...
Right.
It was the newspaper strips for me that really sort of started me off. Definitely newspaper strips. And other ones, but yeah, they were my gateway into comics, I think. Australian newspapers always had, when I was really little, I think they had about 3 different comics in the daily newspapers, which I loved. And that expanded as I grew up and they had more. And the Sunday comics, oh my God, the Sunday was that was where you had the gold mine.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Great.
Love the Sunday comics. And let's see, there are a few, I can't even remember really what we had on Sunday. When I was it changed over the years, but when I was a really little kid, Torcan was this Australian fantasy comic. So it was like Conan the Barbarian, except it was called Torcan, and it was done by this Australian artist and a writer. That was pretty cool because it was very simplistic in style, but just long-haired barbarian guy with a sword. And, fighting magic and bandits and all this kind of stuff. So that was freaking groovy. I loved that. Because I saw, Beastmaster when I was a little kid, and Conan the Barbarian, Conan the Destroyer. Loved those things, and yeah, loved our comic based on that idea. So fantasy was right up my alley.
Apparently, Tolkien is still going.
Really? It can't be done by the same writer, can it? The same artist?
Apparently.
Wow, that's incredible. He must be really old by now. Really old. That's incredible.
Oh, no, hang on. It ended on the 3rd of March 2019. There you go. After 43 years of continuous publication.
My God, that's a run. That is a run.
Levels of violence in the stories have dropped since the strip's early years.
Ah, that's a shame. Yeah, it got crap when it turned to colour, actually, because it was really good in black and white.
Oh, okay.
The colour version's a bit just weird. Because
obviously influenced a bit by the what was the Arthurian comic that was in
Prince Valiant?
Yeah,
Oh, no.
Prince Valiant.
Yeah.
The art style looks like someone trying to do Prince Valiant and failing. I don't mean that as an insult. It just
Yeah, it's what the influence is. It's quite a crude style. He's not really that great an art. He wasn't really that great an artist, but I still loved it anyway, and it was a good gateway to me to.
I've never encountered it before. It looks pretty cool, man.
Yeah, it was fun. It's really the comic equivalent of what people used to paint on panel vans on the sides of those things. But I loved it. Oh dear. So that very formative for me. Tolkien. Yeah.
Wow. Cool.
Heavy metal comic, that one. So yeah, so it's Tolkien, and of course in the same Sunday newspapers we had the big Footrot Flats. Normally you had Footrot Flats in the 3 panels, the daily one, but you had the big version in the Sundays.
Yeah.
Which were freaking cool. So that's a shared Gunwallace Ozone Ocean kind of culture thing, because that's a New Zealand comic that Australians also love. About dog, who was a collie dog, who was meant to be a sheepdog, a working sheepdog, but he had his own ideas. And he had a full-on personality. Not like Snoopy. Snoopy's sort of got an inferred personality. Dog has a real personality. He's the main character in his world. He pretends to talk to everybody else, but obviously they can't actually talk. I think it's like we're meant to think that he's having a conversation with things, with other creatures, other animals or people, but he's not really.
I think the animals could understand each other, but but humans couldn't understand the animals, was the basic concept.
Yeah. And there were various animals like Major, Horse the cat, Major the older dog who was like tougher than Dog, but a bit older.
And there was an actual horse as well that I can't remember the name of.
But
Footrot Flats. I've never heard of it until today. Looking at it now, I love the look of it.
Oh, he was a great cartoonist. He also did some other strips. One called Stanley I used to really love, which was basically a sort of political cartoon, but set in sort of caveman times. Nice. It was hilarious.
Stanley, I have not heard of that one.
Yeah.
Well, Murray Ball
was his. Yeah, Footrot Flats was his. Yeah, his piece de resistance.
And this is something that would appeal to Canadians too, I think, because if you have a bit of a mind, like Australian New Zealanders, I think we have this mythical idea that we are rural when we aren't really. We're sort of more urban. At least Australians really are. But we imagine ourselves as being this rural, agricultural-based community with an agricultural history, like farm kind of origins and all this kind of stuff. So that really appealed to our soul, this Footrot Flats cartoon, because it's set on a farm and, managing sheep and all this kind of stuff. And it really appealed to that mythical version of the way Australians see ourselves, and New Zealanders too, I think.
Well, I did grow up in a rural area. So.
Well, there you are. So it was not mythical to you.
No. I didn't grow up on a farm, but I grew up in a pub. But
oh, okay. That's a real distillation of it all.
Mm.
Yeah.
You get to see all different sides of it.
Yep.
Wow.
Did you actually live in a pub?
I did. Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That your family worked at or owned or something?
Yeah, well, they leased it, which was a really bad financial idea. Yeah, the Midhurst Tavern in Taranaki.
Oh, how
And
cool!
Assuming it was an operating business, and you lived there, and it was also a pub.
Yep. It
Wow.
had once had rooms, but they were all now just empty, which as a kid was great because I just took the biggest room and made it into a playground.
Oh,
That's awesome. Because another name for a pub is a hotel.
Wow. Yes.
And they literally used to be hotels, as Gunwallace says.
But yeah, I remember as a kid not buying comics until I got a bit older, until I was a teenager. But somehow, without buying comics, I still managed to accumulate a very small collection of bits and pieces. And I remember I had a couple of Donald Ducks, the black and white reprints, not actual proper comics, and a Richie Rich and a couple of Sad Sacks. Did you ever encounter Sad Sack?
No, never heard.
I know the name, but I don't think I've ever seen it.
Sad Sack was an army cartoon where he was just a literally sort of depressed private in the army, and it was it was very strange. And I had a couple of Hot Stuff the Little Devil. Have you ever encountered those comics?
Jesus.
I think so. Yeah. Kind of a Casper looking thing.
Yeah. In that same universe as Richie Rich and Casper.
The same character design? Oh, yes. I'm looking at them now.
The same character design.
Yeah. Casper, Richie Rich, Hot Stuff.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. And what Tans was saying earlier before she was called away, I did have a couple of Lucky Lukes, which I don't know how I was given those. I did not have the entire collection like she did. I had 2 of them, and I literally loved them to bits. They fell apart because I read them so much. They ended up just being individual pages.
Which is the mark of a great comic that you can read over and over and over again until it's the binding disappears and it's just pages. It's so fantastic. Lucky Luke. I never even knew that was a comic when I was little. We had the cartoon briefly until it was taken off the air because some idiot complained and said, "This is too violent for children." And then it was gone forever.
Oh man!
Bang bang, Lucky Luke. I tried to watch. They've obviously redone it, and I watched the modern version of the cartoon. It was terrible, so didn't live up to my childhood memories at all. It's a shame. But good quality French cartoons, like all the others, Asterix and all that kind of stuff. Genius. Oh, Asterix, of course. That was one I grew up with. Loved it.
I did not. I only managed to find that in school libraries later on online.
Really? Yeah. Well, I had it in school libraries when I was like in grade 1 and all that kind of stuff. And I used to get them and out and read them, and I was of that age when you start reading and you're really slow, and then you just quickly pick up like this, and then you can't help it. You just read faster and faster and faster. So you get this amazing comic to read. And you think, well, I'm going to really enjoy this. And it's like, a few hours and it's gone. And then you realize, hang on, something wrong here. I'm reading this too fast and not enjoying it enough. But
I've never heard of it until you and Tans started talking about it. So literally on the Quackcast is when I first heard about Asterix.
Wow.
And,
wow.
Looked up some of it now. Yeah, I don't know how I missed it, but it's...
You are going to have some fun, man. That is some good quality comics.
Yeah.
It's incredible because it's about the Gauls, which are kind of a footnote in history. but it expands them to be, you know, the all-important, massive, most important people in the world. Gauls. Yep. The tiny little village in, you know, what was France, I suppose, before
Gaul.
Gaul. Until the Romans took over everything. And, yeah, they're the last holdout village. And it's, all these characters have weird names. Doesn't matter what language they are, they're sort of changed to be a Celtic version of a joke. And it's always the same joke in a different language. So the druid in English is get a fix, you know, it's a drug addict kind of thing. But in different languages, it is a different version of that. But it ends in the suffix fix, because that's a Gallic or Celtic kind of name to have it. There's dogmatics in English and Asterix and Obelix, and they're universal. It doesn't matter what language that is, always Asterix and Obelix. And all these other characters as well. Beautiful. They're so. I think like reading that was something that taught me about how to design different tropes of characters, because these characters fit very strongly into different tropes. Obelix is this fat, jolly kind of fellow who's very strong but a bit dumb. Asterix is a wily, Napoleonic little adventurer guy. They have the chief, who is the wise kind of chief, but, you know, fat and a bit autocratic. Then you have like the guy with the hammer, I can't remember, the smith, and he, you know, is a big beefy guy, but he's headstrong and stubborn. And then there's a fishmonger, and everyone has their own particular characters, and it's beautifully characterized. And it's something you really learn from when you're a little kid and you're sort of learning to draw and how things look. And yeah, it's set around this weird kind of idea of history, the last free Gallic village. So you learn about history when you read the comics, not only like real history like that, but also it's like a distillation of different parts of history, all sort of melded into one. So you learn about, you know, the founding of America, even though that happened like hundreds of years later. The Antony and Cleopatra in Egypt. Mm-hmm. All these kind of things. The Olympic Games, it's all rolled into one. I recommend Asterix and Obelix to anybody. Genius stuff.
Excellent.
And the one similar to that, well, I associate them just because they're always somehow sold together in stores here, was Tintin. And they still are. If you go into a store that sells Asterix and Obelix, next to it will be Tintin for some reason. In this country. And yeah, my next door neighbours who had moved, I'm not exactly sure which part of the colonial parts of Holland they had moved from, but they were Dutch and they had moved to New Zealand, and in order to encourage their kids to read things in English, they bought comics they were familiar with from their homeland in English, and one of them was just a complete set of Tintin. And well, not complete because I didn't have the really racist one that came out later, that wasn't published around the time, the Congo one, the Belgian Congo one. But yeah, it had all the Destination Moon one. Oh, that was
wow, that's a good one.
That.
Tintin was something I did try and read when I was little, but it's so Asterix is very easy because it's got less speech bubbles, basically. Tintin has massive speech bubbles, just packed with text. That's a bit harder to read when you're a really little kid, but very clever, fantastic adventure stuff, and more modern too.
Yeah, I
guess that's what made it so handy to learn English. You have to have that much text.
Sort of set in between the, I don't know, the 50s and the 60s?
I would have said 60s, yeah. 50s, 60s, somewhere around there. Definitely post-war, because there's a lot of sort of spy stuff going on, Cold War-y stuff going on.
Yeah, it does have a really retro look. I think some of it looks 1930s, some of it. Especially Tintin himself, he often wears like those, what's it, weird trousers, petits-fours or something they're called, or knickerbockers. And he has that very old kind of style, and his hair too. Very 1930s look to him.
True.
And it probably did begin back then.
Mm-hmm.
Because, it's Belgian, which is really interesting. So the Belgians have a massive history of making comics, I believe. It's really important to them. Not that much of them gets out over here, but, it's...
And the French as well. They both produce some really cool adulty comics, which I got into much later on. With really deep themes and, gorgeous artwork.
Yeah, I haven't seen much of it. The only ones I've really seen would be in the heavy metal magazine.
Right.
Which is, of course, originally French, Metal Hurlant. Before Kevin Eastman bought it and did his American version. Yeah, you're right. The French and the Belgians just massively known for it. But yeah, all we know... Well, not we, but I, and a lot of other people know them for is things like Asterix and Tintin.
Somewhere in a box, I have a very big collection of French political comics, political graphic novels. So.
Oh, how cool!
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Now, some other comics I grew up with as a little kid. My family went to see my uncle over in this little small tropical town called Broome in Western Australia in about 1985. And when you're in the toilet, he had a massive stack of Punch magazines. And Punch was this satirical left-wing magazine from I don't know, they made them in the 1800s all the way up into the 90s, I think. But he had a big stack of them from the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s. And it had these gloriously beautiful, excellent cartoons in it, as well as, all the political commentary and all this current event commentary as well, and articles by all famous British writers. But it had these excellent little political cartoons, and as a little kid I devoured these things, and I learned so much about British contemporary politics or even older politics that was before my time, just by reading these damn comics, which I love so much. So I learned all sorts of things, the way the British thought about Thatcherism and the Falklands and Reagan and nuclear weapons.
Wow.
Nationalization of the not nationalization of whatever it was, the deregulation of the press and all that kind of stuff. So I learned all about that from these comics as a child. So that gave me a very weird perspective.
Cool.
Wild.
And I know we mentioned Mad Magazine and the video thing. That was another one where I didn't subscribe to it or everything, but as a kid, for some reason, you just end up with them somehow.
Yeah, I think I would buy them at newsstands and shops sometimes, and my babysitter would bring us little collections of used books, sometimes covers ripped off. I don't remember where she got these things, but she worked somewhere where if the cover was missing, the book was garbage. So I think workers there were tearing covers off. I wish I knew where she worked and what was going on.
Oh, there was a system that news agents used here as well, where if you couldn't sell anything by a certain date, you tore the cover off it, sent the cover back to the distributor, and they would refund you the money.
That must have been it.
Yeah, because I got some of those as well from that very same method.
Nice. My babysitter was all over. Probably a different person giving them to you.
Probably.
No, same. It was all the same. All connected.
But we would get a lot of Mad Magazine collections. Al Jaffe did a character called Willie Weirdy, so we had a couple of those.
What were they called?
And, snappy answers to stupid questions. There was a character called Willie Weirdy, this little sort of deviant boy, but it was very, Willie
Weirdy.
It wasn't particularly edgy or anything like that. Yeah, and all kinds of stuff. Beetle Bailey, not great stuff. I mean, you guys were reading some really great stuff. But,
no, all our comics are equal, Baines. I mean, it might make it sound like they're great, but no, it's not really.
Yeah, but I do remember Mad Magazine standing out, like the good Mad Magazine stuff. Really, an eye opener.
There was so much in it. You could go through and look at all the things in the margins and.
Yeah,
Marginalia. Yeah. Sergio Anez.
Just relatable. That's what my homework looked like in school.
Same.
Inspired by Mad, and got in lots of trouble for that.
You gotta have little characters having adventures in the margins. That's just how it is.
You have to do it.
Yeah, freaking hell. Mad Magazine, and my favorite part, of course, was the Spy versus Spy, which is easy to get into because it's always the same kind of thing. These spies battling each other. Sometimes the white spy wins, sometimes the black spy wins.
Sometimes they both lose.
Exactly. Just freaking awesome Spy versus Spy. Then you've got a lighter side, which is. Yeah, I really remember that. I freaking loved that because they were always in the weird 70s fashions until very late in the tenure of that particular comic. And the movie parodies, which were amazing and taught me so much about drawing, and especially drawing sexy women, because God, those were, whenever they had a sexy woman, the artist obviously put in a lot of effort to make her extra sexy. I remember that, or at least my very hormonal version of me from back then remembers that. Oh dear. But Mad Magazine, just awesome. And of course, the back cover had the whole fold-in thing, and that was the big highlight of it.
Loved it, yeah.
So clever. Every aspect of it. Mad Magazine, weren't they EC Comics or something? It was that same company?
Yes, I think so.
And they were the only comic company that had been going on for the full period of, from the early days of comics, and then you had the whole, the Comic Code of Authority that messed things up, and these guys still were doing comics because they were doing horror comics and stuff like that as well. And then after that, they were
Tales
just
from the Crypt and stuff like that.
Exactly. Yeah. So they were before bloody Marvel and DC and all that bullshit. So they say, "Oh yeah, Batman is really old and Superman." No, Mad Magazine. These guys were, EC Comics were around way before you.
I do remember having one copy of a Batman comic when I was young. Again, a black and white reprint, not an original, and it was just. I think it was a Denny O'Neil one or something, and it was just Batman hanging around on the tops of buildings sulking for 20 pages.
Yeah, when I was a kid, I couldn't get into that mainstream stuff, except for Phantom. Oh my God. Phantom was something that a lot of Commonwealth countries loved for some reason. I don't know whether he's big in New Zealand, but he was in Australia.
He was very big.
Yep, there you go. South Africa, a lot of other Commonwealth countries as well. For some reason, we all love Phantom. Really? Okay.
Didn't get into that one.
The Ghost Who Walks. Well, it was in the newspapers here, but I also loved the comic books as well.
You could buy those really cheap because they were just these really thin paper black and white reprints of it.
Oh, yeah. Terrible quality paper. It's just awful. But
yeah. You couldn't even use it in the toilet. It was that bad.
Just fall apart. But oh my God, I love Phantom. And Phantom's one of the first superheroes. He was before Batman and Superman, I think.
He wasn't really a superhero. He was more on Well, I suppose he did have some supernatural powers sometimes when the plot required it.
And he's thought of it as a superhero these days.
Oh, okay.
And he's included in their the lot of them. But yeah, back then he was he mainly had his like punching power, where he imprints a skull on you if he punches you hard enough.
Oh yeah, true.
He had a wolf that he would talk to, and a horse, and a couple of Colt 45 automatics, I think. You go blam blam blam, and he normally wouldn't kill people. He just like, I don't know, scare the shit out of them or something. There was a lot of that.
I know you mentioned you liked Modesty Blaze.
Oh yeah, Modesty.
Right.
Yeah, I love that. Mainly that was a 3-panel strip in the magazines and the newspapers.
Yeah, but they'd often, like, I think we had a Sunday newspaper that would put an entire week's worth of them together.
Okay.
Or a month's worth of them. Maybe it was a month's worth of them together or something.
Yeah, it was such a long time ago, but Willie Garvin and Modesty Blaze were the two main characters in that one. So they had a weird kind of sexless friendship, so a platonic relationship for most of the run of that comic. And it was a really nice kind of thing for some reason, because like he protected her and she kind of treated him as a brother character.
Right.
And she was in charge though, and he was like her helper. And they were like spies and also criminals and all this kind of stuff, and they went in through all these different kind of different occupations. But for most of it, they were like secret agent kind of characters doing various things. And I just loved it. It was because it had this weird kind of 1970s, 1960s kind of James Bondy feel to it.
Right.
I don't know what else. It was just a weird thing. So Modesty Blaze was pretty cool. Willie Garvin and Modesty Blaze. There's a movie out. I think there's a few movies.
Okay.
But yeah, definitely worth getting into.
I do remember Modesty Blaze being quite sexy.
Yeah, she was. She was like a Brigitte Bardot kind of figure. She had that kind of old school supermodel look to her. Like very pouty lips. And she'd often be in her underwear. She'd have to swim through a culvert at night. Take all her clothes off, just wear her underwear. That kind of thing. So there's a lot of appeal to it like that. But yeah, she was like the James Bond girl, but she was also the James Bond, you know? With Willie Garvin as the muscle. He was this very British character. So she wasn't British. I think she had been like an orphan from Spain or something, rescued during the Civil War, something like that. And brought up by a criminal gang, and she became like the master criminal. She's kind of graduated, and later on she picked up this Willie Garvin guy as like a mate and a friend and compatriot, and he was like her bodyguard kind of thing, and they went in all these missions together and stuff. So when Willie Garvin was a Cockney British kind of guy with blonde hair and, you know, wearing turtleneck jumpers, whatever.
Okay.
Had that kind of 1960s, 1970s tough guy look.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
When I got a bit older, I was allowed to actually buy comics, and I bought a weekly comic called Battle Action, which was a British comic that had lots of war stories in it.
Okay.
Particularly remember from that Charlie's War, which was like revolutionary stuff for me. I'd actually started out getting a thing called Action, but then Action and Battle, which were two separate comics, merged together and became Battle Action.
Oh, okay. So
It sounds familiar.
Like reprinted comics or something?
No, these were new. These were new. And Charlie's War was done by Pat Mills, who later on did some 2000 AD stuff.
Oh, 2000 AD. Oh my god, that's a new thing.
And I ended up getting into 2000 AD because for some reason there was several weeks where they didn't ship in the weekly comic of Battle Action. It just didn't turn up in our newsagents, in our shop, and it was week after week after week and no comic. And so my mother said, "Okay, we'll buy a different one then." And I looked on the shelves, and there was this strange, strange cover that looked really, really odd. And it was called 2000 AD, and it was all science fiction. I said, "Oh, I have that one," and boy, I didn't look back after that.
Oh, nice.
It was like issue 76 or something.
Wow, quite early.
Yeah, and I eventually ended up getting all the earlier ones.
So yeah, 2000 AD, that the very British action comedic or horror comic. Usually, a lot of them are horror. The stories, really.
Yeah, but there was definitely a dry sense of humor in there.
Oh yeah, dry. Yeah, often dark sense of humor, especially to Judge Dredd.
Yeah.
Strontium Dog, I think, was another.
Yep.
Yeah, just a lot of people being killed and heads blown up and exploded and all that kind of stuff.
Carlos Esquire did the art for that. I actually have a page of his from a Strontium Dog comic.
Wow. Oh my, really?
Yeah, it was given to me by a friend.
Well, that would be something to treasure too, because that's a rarity. Yeah. Well, 2000 AD is an incredibly influential kind of groundbreaking comic in the comics world. It influenced a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think like Warhammer 40k would exist if it wasn't for something,
I never thought of that.
That kind of thing, yeah. But Tank Girl, all this kind of stuff, owes its like lineage to that.
Mm.
So yeah, 2000 AD. It's like the British version of heavy metal in a way, but it's just British. Whereas heavy metal is everything.
And more kid friendly ish.
A little.
It didn't have nudity in it, so therefore it was kid friendly, even though some of the stories are very dark.
Yeah, it's like people being skinned alive and all sorts of things,
Oh man. Oh.
Yeah, there was an early Judge Dredd where was it the Fink brothers are talking, and there are these evil criminals, and one of them says, "Hey, I was nice to that guy. I kicked him to death by wearing slippers just so it wouldn't hurt so much."
So I got traumatized reading an early, not an early one, but a 2000 AD comic where it was these whatever those brothers were in the wastelands, and they'd taken over a spaceship and they'd been throwing people out of the spaceship and watching them blow up.
Oh, good God.
At that, like, reading it as a kid, I was like, oh my God.
But that had a big influence on me, those stories. Yeah.
Incredible artwork. It's just genius stuff.
Yeah.
I think Pitface, who used to be on the Quackcast, she was massively, wholly influenced by Judge Dredd.
Oh, right. I did not know that.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
There we are. Yeah. Her whole life, she wouldn't even exist if it wasn't Judge Dredd. Oh, fantastic. You know what else? When I was really little, one of the comics that you mentioned before, a comic you read and read and read until it was pieces. Well, one that I had when I was really little was Dennis the Menace. But so there's a British version and there's an American version of this, and I read the British version. And the British version of Dennis the Menace, he really is a menace. He's an evil little shit.
That's the Beano stuff, isn't it?
I think so, yeah. I think it came out of there.
Yeah,
I had a hardcover version of just Dennis the Menace, and he's a little bastard.
A rotter.
He's a total rotter. Yeah. There's nothing good about him at all. And he looks evil too. He's drawn evil, and like the American version is drawn like happy-go-lucky, and he could be evil. That's my little face. But yeah, the British version, he looks evil because he is evil.
Yeah.
A lot of fun. I read it and I reread it and I reread it. And I still have it around somewhere.
Okay.
Good old Dennis the Menace. Very formative. Did you guys read any really adult stuff when you were really young kids, or?
In comics, no, not really.
I think the most adult stuff I read was probably Mad Makers.
Yeah.
Yeah, same here. Yeah.
When I turned 18 and left home and went to university, there was a guy in the hall of residence I was staying at, who, a supervisor, who said, "Oh, I'll take you down to a store you'll like." And, led me down this dark alleyway. And I'm going, "Where the heck are we going?" And and there was a store that was only open on Tuesdays and Thursdays from like 2 till 4, and it was a comic book shop.
Wow.
And that's how I got really heavily into comics. And years later, I ended up working for them for a while, and it was great. At one point, I actually went up to the guy that ran the store and said, "How do you write comics? Do you have anything that tells you how you write comics?" And he didn't, but he sort of had a long chat with me about how you might go about writing a comic.
Jeez, so you had your pick. You could just read anything you wanted.
Oh, well, yeah. He preferred if you bought them.
That's a very easy way to get into it. I think, like, when I was started off at art school, I had a friend, this Hungarian guy, who was super into comics, and I'd never been into comics before, because as I was growing up, I sort of had this a bit of a cringe feeling about comics, and I was thinking, no, I have to be into books. I have to be into books without pictures in order to, to be properly grown up. So I had gone away from comics as I'd aged. But this dude was so into comics of all different kinds, so massive, and he took me to comic book shops, and I thought, oh my god, what is this? And this was like during the 90s, early 90s. And this was when Image Comics was really starting up, and they had all that kind of weirdness, and
right,
like you had Liefeld and all that kind of stuff, like extra
McFarlane.
Yeah, McFarlane. Yeah, Spawn was a big thing, like really bloody kind of stuff. And I remember getting into Lady Death, and that was a very like exaggerated booby heavy comic, and reading that thinking, oh my god, this stuff's comics now. And seeing all those Elvira covers and seeing how very unsexy Elvira was, because the covers were fantastic, but the insides of Elvira comics are just terrible. The artwork is just bad.
I'll be right back.
But that was an interesting time to get into comics, because that was when the comic shops had just sort of started to be popular again, I think.
Yeah, comics were huge then, or just before then maybe, and right around then, when all those creators split off to go with Image Comics or form Image Comics.
Yeah, they were doing they were doing foil covers and crazy stuff like that, holographic and
yeah.
I was kind of getting away from them right at that point. I think like that was the end of my heyday.
Yeah, I got heavily into the independent comics around then, like Journey, which was a black and white thing about a guy in the American wilderness, and the sort of early colonial part of American history, and things like Bitchy Bitch by Roberta Gregory, and all that sort of stuff. Because I was working in a comic book store at that point.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah.
It was one of my student jobs. I had 2 student jobs, kind of thing.
So you'd be turned off by the mainstream, and you'd be something a bit more creative.
And I got into Cerebus until it stopped being funny, and
Uh-huh.
Oh wow, what was Cerebus?
Cerebus the Aardvark. It started out as a Conan the Barbarian ripoff,
Oh, I know this thing.
and then turned
Yeah.
into this incredibly funny thing with Marx Brothers humor, and then sort of ate itself and became incredibly masturbatory.
Now, Gunwallace means this metaphorically.
Yes. It didn't help that the creator broke up with his female partner, and then became quite anti-woman.
Oh God, no!
And took it out in the comics, man.
Yeah. Embarrassing.
Yeah, I mean, the artwork in it though was interesting, and the first 100 issues of Cerebus are genius, but the other 200 I could take and leave. And I never finished it. I never got to the end.
I'm not surprised that it turned into that.
Oh, the latest stuff ended up being these huge sort of screeds of text that were sort of written as though they were written by Oscar Wilde, and
well, that doesn't sound bad.
Well, yes and no. It's not what you signed up for, when you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But the first 100 stuff was just great. It was just wonderful. That's a good. Basically, when he goes to the moon and meets Flaming Carrot, that's probably about the end of it.
Flaming Carrot. Oh dear. Well, with my comics journey, I sort of got into comics with my Hungarian friend Andreas, he was called, but then he sort of left to go to do architecture or something, or some other university or technical school, and I kept on with the art stuff, and then I went back out of comics again, and it wasn't until I was doing one of my degrees that the art lecturer forced me to get into comics, because I'd been out of it, but I'd still be doing my art style was still very representational, because I love doing that. And he said, I'm not going to pass you unless you do this in a comic form. And I thought, oh God, I have to do comics? Wow. What the hell? I want to do fine art. I don't want to do bloody comics. So I had to do my stuff in a comic style, and I had to research heavy metal comics to get into that, so know what he was talking about. And I had an Argentinian friend who was really into heavy metal and had a few issues. So I started reading that, and I was
a few issues
away.
Of the comic, or just a few issues?
Both. But yeah, I started getting into that, and I loved heavy metal, so that was a new thing for me.
Right.
And that's a bit about my comic history. And yeah, I got into Tank Girl and various things like that, and they were all influences. So,
well, I started doing comics in the the early 90s. With ended up falling in with a bunch of people who were very talented, and in fact, one of them ended up drawing Tank Girl for 5 years.
My God! Wow!
And drawing Judge Dredd as well for a couple of times in 2000 AD, and has the occasional series still in there.
Jesus, royalty.
Yep, Rufus Dayglow.
God, well, that's
still
fantastic.
In touch with him. But yeah, we were, when we were making comics, we did them really cheaply. Little A5 black and white photocopied things. And I remember we were parodying that whole trend for silly variant covers stuff and mirror things. So we ended up, there was a character called Straight Jacket Ninja, and he had a visor. And I remember for the one issue, we had a bunch of reflective card or something that someone had got, and we cut it up the size of that visor and stuck them on the covers, to sort of parody that whole trend that was going on, and then sold it for $2 a copy.
Awesome. Yeah.
First edition. What would they like? Issue number 001 or something.
Yeah,
So,
and someone gave
Right.
us someone gave us 20 free color copies at one point, so we did a variant cover. But yeah, we churned out 12 issues of this little comic, which it was quite cool at the time.
That's awesome. Yeah, so cool. Do you still have them?
I
Or
have the
some of them
original.
around?
I have the original masters. I don't have copies of all 12. I don't. Yeah, I ended up giving away or selling the issues at the time. We never hung on to them, but I do have all the original pages. So.
so you could
Rufus.
turn them into webcomics.
No, not really. Rufus is currently working on a book to remember one of the people that was in it who died during the COVID pandemic. So,
Oh. Well, rest in peace.
so he has access to a whole bunch of that stuff that I scanned in for him, and is slowly putting together something. So that should be fun.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. Like, it's a published book.
It will be, yeah.
Oh my god. Well,
Yeah.
that's a fantastic piece of, part of the comics world that you are solidly a part of.
It was a long time ago.
So, Baines, we've got 5 minutes left. Tell us some more about your comics history.
Oh yeah, well after the early stuff was sort of a lot of like sitcom type comics that I really didn't understand. I would read like Al what's he
Al
called?
Cap?
Al Cap. Yeah, something
Oh.
like that. And he was,
Yeah.
I
And
really didn't
Andy
understand it.
Andy Cap.
Andy Cap, that's what it is. Yeah, Andy Cap. Al Cap is the cartoonist. Yeah, Andy Cap, and we'd like Hagar the Horrible, and like this very
Oh, of
a
course.
lot of stuff that was very similar in style to Beetle Bailey and stuff. I read Dennis the Menace and all that stuff too. Then later, and Mad Magazine was probably the best of what I was reading. I got into Marvel later very deeply. I devoured, the official guide to the Marvel Universe, which were these encyclopedias. I would like just pour
Oh, wow.
over these
Did you buy
details.
those?
Oh yeah, I did. I collected them, and I was
I
so
remember
super into it.
selling them at the comic book store going, wow, people actually buy these things.
I know. I was a sucker. I was a total sucker. Yeah. And I had the deluxe edition as well, the one they reprint later. Even thinking like this makes no sense, like because all this stuff will be out of date so quickly. But I don't know. At the time, it didn't seem to be go out of date that quickly. Then after that, the comic universes just went crazy and all over the place. So
Yeah, the end of the 80s and the early 90s, they really did go nuts with all the Crisis on Infinite Earth and DC, and then all of the big, Secret Wars and
yeah,
stuff in Marvel.
yeah.
Which they're making films of now.
But I found those great fun for some reason, and loved X-Men, and they brought back the original team of X-Men, sort of a modern, or a more grown-up version. I was into all that stuff, and I loved the old repeats of the Stan Lee, Jack Kirby X-Men they're sillier and everything. Yeah, I love that stuff until it just faded.
Well, this is good because, like Terrence Gummoff, me, we're not really into that stuff, so it really helps to have that perspective.
Yeah, at a certain era, I think that's when that stuff was really popular. And some of it's now been
yeah. That's what's amazed me though, is I was a DC guy. I mean, I didn't buy that many DC comics, but if I was going to buy one of the big two, it was always DC. I bought things like Shade the Changing Man and Animal Man and stuff like that when they came out in the 90s or the 80s and 90s. And yet, with the movies, I'm completely into the Marvel movies. Don't like any of the DC movies. I didn't read the Marvel comics at all, but
the movies work. Oh yeah, there you go.
Can't stand what they did with the DC movies to some of the characters.
Aquaman's good. That's a good film. That's a DC character.
Yeah, but that's like being in an ice cream store and going, the vanilla's good.
Also, Suicide Squad.
Yeah.
Those films, all the Harley Quinn films, they're all good.
Really?
Yeah.
I
Okay.
haven't
I
seen
like
those.
it.
I saw Suicide Squad. The Suicide Squad. But, that's
Seen. Yeah, I've liked all the ones. Oh god, we got 1 minute. Okay, so
Woo.
thank you for listening to the early childhood comics and to the later comics, like later teen years and early adult years. Thank you very much for listening. This has been Quackcast number 725. With me, it's been Gunwallace and Faves.
Woo.